What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another Code Fellowship episode. My name is JB, and I have a special guest with us in this episode for season 3. He is a well-known individual within the WordPress space and also the web design business space. He's actually one of my mentors, or my only mentor outside of being self-taught. And I'm really excited to have him on. I'll let him introduce himself, name, where you're from, what got you into web design. And I know you're of the faith, so if you talk a little bit about that and how you incorporated that into your business.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on with you, JB. It's been cool seeing your journey progress. So I'm pumped to help you out in the next chapter. And you're a good case study of who I help. I help web designers, mainly with the business side of web design. It didn't start that way. I started doing YouTube tutorials on WordPress and Divi, and I was known for how to build websites. And then I had so many questions from people about how do I build the web design business side of things, because I had been doing it for a decade. So I was like, yeah, maybe I'll do courses on that too. And then now that's primarily what I do. So yeah, I'm Josh. My website is joshhall.co. It's a personal brand. I'm based in Columbus, Ohio. I'm a family man. I have a wife of, 2015. So 8 years. Coming up on 9 in the fall or in the spring.
About the 7 this year.
Yep, 7 this year. Yep. 3 kiddos, all under 5. So it's wild times right now, but good times. Love working from home. And yeah, I love being a work from homer. I'm unhireable at this point, being an entrepreneur and having my own business. I like to tell people I haven't had a job since 2009. Always
from the recession
is a fun way to start the conversation. That's when I used to be a cabinet maker for a tour bus customizing shop, actually, and got laid off. And then this is kind of the segue to the story. I got laid off as a cabinet maker. And the day after I opened up Photoshop, I had always had an interest in design, and I just started doing design work. And yeah, at that time I was in a band, a Christian metal band. We were Weekend Warriors, playing a lot of shows everywhere. And then I was also the drummer for a praise band at my local church.
Nice.
And I told them that I was starting to do design, and it wasn't a big church. So they were like, thank God somebody does design. They can have somebody do our artwork. So I started kind of helping them out with some of the artwork and stuff. And then they had a member who was a web designer who helped build their site in Dreamweaver.
Wow.
This was back in 2009. And I got laid off. Actually, I think it was 2010 is when I started really diving into web design, because I started with graphic design, then got into web design. And really, I mean, honestly, it was the church that asked me if I would be interested in taking over the site, which is really what pushed me further into web design, because I was mainly doing graphic design and band artwork and stuff like that. A lot of Photoshop, a lot of Illustrator, a lot of InDesign. And they said, hey, our developer, I think he was like part-time pastor, was also doing the website. He was like, he just left. Would you like to run the website? And I was like, sure. I've never done a website before, but I'll give it a go. So they actually sent me to a paid program in my community college here to learn Dreamweaver.
Wow.
And that was how I got started into web design.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool. So it seems as God paved your way to building a ministry behind the web design business sector, because you've been
It was certainly the pathway. Yeah, we could call it I don't know if maybe I'll change my tagline to Divine Web Design Mentor. Ooh, Divine Web Design. That's a good brand name. I should have locked up that domain name. But yeah, it was definitely. I mean, I would say it was a God thing for sure. With being that I really didn't know what I was going to do with my life at that point. The band was kind of sputtering along. We weren't making enough money to live off of. Although the band experience really helped me translate to business in a lot of ways, because I learned how to market, and work with people, and sell, and everything
and it
else.
flexed
But
your graphic design skills, because I remember one of your older podcast episodes, like you were talking about how you started your business and you had all different types of services, and it wasn't just web design. It was also like print services, like making a poster.
Hey, I have it here.
Oh, there it is. Yes.
Yep.
Guys, this is the
There it is.
epic,
I still have
epic.
a copy of my OG card for
Yeah.
anyone watching on YouTube. Yep. In Transit Studios, web design, graphic design, and drum lessons.
We'll post up a
Yes.
picture of it on the screen as we talk about
Cool.
it.
And and you can find it if you go to joshhall.co/business card.
Yeah.
You can take the screenshot of
Sweet.
that. But yeah, I was doing a lot. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. So when I was working for the church, they were paying me part time to do the website. I was learning Dreamweaver,
Mhm.
and at that time they had a graphic designer that they brought on staff, and then we were kind of working together. And then naturally I just started doing more website stuff, and then my thought was, okay, I'm enjoying learning web design, and I like doing graphic design. So I actually enrolled in the community college for a program, an associate's degree for digital design and graphics.
Mm.
It was mainly graphic design with a few ups, like additional courses on web design. So my whole goal and my whole thought was, I'll just do some freelance on the side, and while I'm working for the church and while I'm doing freelance work, I'll just continue to do this night school stuff. And I was doing odd jobs and stuff. And then my goal was to get a job as a web designer or as a graphic designer. And then I just got further and further into web design and freelancing and starting getting clients, that I just started making money. And then I was like, well, I really like websites. I'm going to take web design more seriously. And I just started getting clients. And by the time I was a few years, it took me like 3 years to do that program because I did night school. And by the end of that, I had made like $30,000 one year. And I was
Wow.
like, okay, if I can make 30,000, I could make 50. I was like, and I could do 50, I could probably get to six figures. And that's when I just jumped all in and like really went for my business.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool story. That's really really cool. And what instrument were you playing again? You were saying you were a drummer.
Drums.
I'm a
Yep.
guitarist, and one thing that
Okay.
I always notice, since you've mentioned it in the past as well, is that every single web developer or software engineer or whatever type of web based business it is, there's always a musician. Like,
Yep.
what is it that you took out of your experience as a musician on the road, apply, and what is that you took out of that experience and applied it to a business mindset when it comes to web design, which is very
Well, I think
specific?
there's kind of two different parts. I think as a musician, there's the act of like writing music and
Right.
playing music, which is really parallel to being a
Creative.
creative and being a designer. But then there's the business side of things too as a musician. Like, so I'll say as a musician from the artistic side, the creative side, it's a lot of the same use of the brain, I feel like. I think that's why
Mm,
a lot of web designers come from music backgrounds, because we like to tinker, we like to experiment, we like to try new things, whether it's CSS or new builders or code, whatever. We like to try things out, and we like to see something come to life. Like creating a song is a lot like creating a website. It's like there was nothing there; it's a blank canvas, and then you make something. You get the chills, and it's awesome. It's like I mean, it's art. It really is in a weird way. It's art, code, design, websites, business building, strategy. It's all art in a way. And then there's the business side of things. When I was in a band, we did take it semi seriously. I mean, we were really hustling and getting out there. Whether we did it well or not, that's fair to ask. But I mean, we learned, or that's fair to say, we learned how to like create a product, create an album, how to market it, how to sell it. We were doing interviews, we were doing shows all over. We were partnering with bands that we knew. We were promoting. So we did all those things. And when I started my business, it was a lot of the same muscles that I built up from doing that. It was like, okay, create a service, web design. How do I market it? Where do I go? Networking groups, a lot of that kind of thing. How do I sell it? Because in the band world, we had to sell ourselves with
right.
our music to get on tours and stuff. And yeah, it was a lot of parallels, both creatively and from the business side,
Hmm.
that in a very weird way empowered me like way better than school would have to start
Hmm.
my business.
Yeah, and the selling yourself is probably a very key takeaway that I take from what you just said, because even if you're not starting your own business as a developer trying to get into the tech industry, you know that there hundreds and thousands of people who either just graduated with a computer science degree, uh, doing the traditional method of going to college or university, or the non-traditional method of going to a coding boot camp, or being self-taught, right, using resources online, and or just experimenting and seeing how far those skill sets go. But when you go to apply for a job and you have that interview, and some of the questions may pop out where it's like, what makes you different from your peers? Or they don't even ask you, but they're seeking for it. They're trying to see like what's unique about you. And I've always noticed that when I interviewed for these roles, that's something that I took out of my time as a musician as well. Even as a motorsports photographer, when I was one in my teenage years, was selling yourself, like being able to position yourself in a way where your skill sets may be the same, but how are unique they compared to the person next to you?
That's a really good point, man. Like in the band world, anyone who quote unquote makes it, I don't know if that's a term nowadays with the industry, but ev- bands and artists had to be unique. If you were a copycat of somebody else, you're only going to get so far. They've already got
Right.
the real thing. Like, uh, we're not talking Christian rock, but like when Slipknot came out,
Mm-hmm.
there weren't metal bands that were massed and had 9 members. That was very unique. I think that was one of the things in a marketing sense that like blew Slipknot up originally was just like, wow, they have 9 members. What do all these guys do? And I mean, yeah, I mean, you could go up and down the lineup. Like my band was unique in some ways, but I don't think we were
Were they
unique
like
enough.
Skillet in some way? Like Skillet
Yeah, it was
is
heavier than Skillet. I'd probably
okay.
put us in with
So like heavy
well,
metal.
it was pretty heavy. Yeah,
Mm.
it was like a notch up from Skillet, but not like super heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Kind of like
but
almost
yeah,
like Megadeth.
little bit different.
A
Yeah,
little
are
bit
you familiar
different.
with
Yeah.
Killswitch Engage?
Oh yes, yes, yes.
That's
Yeah.
probably our
Okay.
closest.
Got
Yeah, a
you.
lot of people said we were the Christian Killswitch for a while. So,
Interesting.
but even in that case, yeah, like you got to be, you do have to be unique and
Mhm.
original in some sense. I actually think I didn't really think about it, but it's a great lesson for all web designers and businesses to figure out your unique selling proposition. That is the USP, is that what they call it? Or yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
your unique selling value,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. What is unique about you? And by the way, this is one thing I teach in my community. You're a part of it, JB. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll probably try to do this better, but it really is pulling out like what separates you from everybody else. Is it a skill set you have? Is it something about you? Like for me, I wasn't a great web designer initially, and what I was getting clients. What I learned is what I had that no one else had was that I actually cared. I really cared about my clients, and they could sense that. They could sense that from the get go. Whereas a lot of web designers were clearly just trying to get a project or an agency, treat them like a number. Clients really appreciated that I really cared, and if I couldn't figure something out, I would work my butt off to figure out how to do it. So, um, yeah, a unique advantage is huge for starting a business, just like it is in music.
Yes. 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 It is, and especially with like the Christian music industry, contemporary Christian music industry is it's a very tough industry to get into. And sadly the ones that make it really good are sadly the ones that either they don't have sound doctrine or they're not very bold in their faith, but they go through the reins of the business, right? Being unique where you are a musician who has passion for the music and it shows in the way that you write and compose your music sometimes doesn't always take you off anywhere. And the same way, and I've noticed that as a web designer or a developer of any kind, you can be using the same technology stack, but if there is no uniqueness in how you're implementing that stack into your work and your workflow, um, then it's apparent that you're just like everyone else, right?
Mhm.
Like a copy, or not like a, what can I? There's a specific word I'm trying to find, but I can't.
I know, I
Kind of.
feel you. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I mean, even like, yeah, you and I could both build a WordPress site. We use the
Hmm.
exact same tools, and it would look different because we each have our own
Creative,
flair on
right.
things. Unless you're just using a template and just strictly changing out images and text.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I've heard that said. Actually, there's a book behind me called Rework by the guys from Basecamp, and they even say in there like a musician, two different musicians could play the exact same guitar, the exact same song, and it would sound very different
Hmm.
because they have a different feel. They pluck the strings differently. Same thing in web design, even though it's it's a different type of art, but we do have our own little personal flair on it.
Yeah.
So it is unique and is different. But I think what you're kind of getting to with where creativity gets muddled in and loses whatever it looks like if your your art extends out to where it shouldn't go or is different. I think we're getting into like passion versus profit. Real
Hmm.
creativity in business is what's tricky. That's
Yes.
really what
Yeah.
and I saw that in the musician world. Like I remember at the very end, at the end of our run as a band, we were a band for 6 years. My singer was just kind of desperate to just keep on doing something, and he was like, "What if we were just a cover band?" And I was like, "Oh, I I could not think of anything worse that I would ever want to do. Like I would rather make original music and make no money than be a cover band making a ton of money. I just that it was like so that was a good example of like how when things aren't going well, you can just extend past what you
Yeah.
should be doing or what you want to. So yeah, passion and profit, creativity and business, those things are very tricky when you mix
Mhm.
yeah, money with creativity.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of my biggest downfalls that has been when trying to build a successful or a stable freelance business. It's because I pour my heart and soul into the projects that it actually muddies the water and causes me not to have the right amount of discernment in other areas. Right? You get emotionally attached, and that happened to me a few years ago when you and I talked that one time. I remember I sent you a very emotional
Yeah,
Loom video,
I do. I
and
remember.
during that time, I just got out of the military. I just bought my house. I was trying to do this freelance thing full time, but I couldn't make ends meet necessarily. I was scraping by. By the grace of God, He provided where I lacked, but He was also calling me to humility because I invested so much time into something that I wasn't reaping anything from my family. It was to fulfill my passion and my desire, and that's where it can get very dangerous because we don't know how to differentiate a good balance or build a good balance.
I
Uh,
think it's really common with creatives too, which is, and I've seen this. It seems to be worse for graphic designers than website designers, but graphic
mm,
designers are notorious for just like taking forever and just not stopping a project. And the same is true for web designers too. But you do like I think the reality is if it is a business and you have like the mortgage company isn't going to be like, well, I just love that you're passionate about your project. Just pay us later. No, like you got to freaking
right.
pay this month. So I think honestly, like the reality of life makes it so you got to have constraints, you got to have deadlines, and your creativity has got to fit within those molds. Now, what I would say is if there's areas of life that you're passionate about, and I'm not speaking just to you, JB, but like
Right.
anybody,
Right.
and I'm telling this to myself too, give yourself avenues to just be passionate and creative and have sense of freedom. But when it comes to paying your bills, you got to have an engine that is even if you can
Hmm.
be passionate and creativity, but it's got to be capped. And I learned this as a web designer. I'm like, okay, if I charge $3,000 for a website, but I spend 100 hours on it, I'm going to make $3 an hour. So is that right? Did I do the math right on that? Or did I do it wrong?
I think so. I'm a software engineer, but
So
I'm terrible at math.
something around there. And I'm not a numbers guy. That's a problem. But you see what I mean? Like you have to say, okay, $3,000 for a website. I'm going to cap myself at like, this is, 30 hours or whatever it is, which means it'll be $100 an hour. I know I got the math right on that.
You said 300 hours.
Yep. Well, 3,000 divided by 100 hours. I think that'd
Oh,
be
okay.
It'd be like $3 an hour.
30.
30, $30 an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you know, still not great.
Close enough.
Still not great,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
if you want to have taxes and stuff. But if you give yourself a cap and you can make $100 an hour in 30 hours, then you got a business. Like, and I say that to say, when it comes to creativity, you have got to constrain it and almost protect yourself. Like, you really have to manage the right and left brain approach to where, like, you're creative, but you're also going to hit deadlines, which is why deadlines are important. Because yeah, it's tough. Creativity. Also, I think there's an issue where creativity can be a bit of a, I hate to say a curse in a way, but it can be something where it just doesn't stop and nothing gets done. And if you're working on something that should get done, there has to be an end point. Like, I remember I had a photographer and videographer friend who was really artsy, really creative, and was really talented, but never had a website because he could never decide on what he wanted to do. And he just wanted to keep on changing things and it never got done. So you kind of have to choose, am I going to be creative with a cap, with a constraint, or am I just going to be passionate and just never get anything done? It's kind of one or two avenues as creatives we
Yeah.
have.
And I can relate to that photographer client because that's me as a developer, as a web designer. Like, I I would start a project, and then that project would just start to, it would extend, and people have been gracious. But that's been the biggest flaw that I've been trying to tame for these past couple of years. And I started to learn when I got more into the programming side of the web space. I started to learn that it's not about how it looks, it's about how it functions. If that's a primary reason why somebody hires you to build a solution, it's the way it's going to function and make them money. That's the end goal. Then when you get that functionality down, you start putting on the makeup onto the project. You start building out the a more refined design of the functionality of the website or the application. And and that's from a one person perspective or a couple people, especially if you don't have a designer in your team. But when you do have a designer, then obviously that load, that creative load, is offset to someone else. And then now you could give more of like a consulting aspect of it when you start developing. And that's kind of like how I do at my job. Now I'm noticing that the designs that they give us for specific software that we're building is coming from another company. It's already been paid for, it's been established. But now, as a software engineer, I'm implementing this design from mockup to working software. But I have to basically bring the piece of component or the whole page to life in a functional way. So when I started learning that, I started to get rid of that perspective of like, no, it has to be done this way so that it can launch. And something that you've always said in all your videos and all your podcasts and even in the community is no website is perfect.
Yeah,
No website is
perfection
perfect.
is the enemy of progress. I think that's the quote.
Yeah,
Where yeah, I
yeah.
mean it's true. And again, as creatives, we just want everything to be perfect. I still struggle with this, but I've learned to get it to where a piece of anything, I mean, content, design, whatever it is, a message, if it's at 90%, we're probably good. Let's ship and let's go. Because 90% is going to be, you know, usually well good enough to be fine. And then if you have more time to tinker and experiment, then cool. But oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the cap on creativity is very tough, but it is absolutely crucial if you want to stay in business. Basically, it really isn't. There's not another way around it to be able to. It's almost like fire. Creativity and passion's like fire, but you got to keep it in the fireplace. You can't let it go everywhere, otherwise it's going to burn stuff down.
Yes, yes, yes. And when it comes to that perfectionism and the aspect of always tinkering and but not allowing yourself to just release the product, get real-time feedback, Because at the end of the day, you can give yourself feedback, right? As much as you want, but it's not a real world feedback. You're not, people are not really using the product. Um, so then it hinders what it comes
That's
next
a
in
good
your
point.
process.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you could try to go to 100% in the case of like a product, like a SaaS product or something. But then if you're focusing a ton of time on something that isn't going to matter or shouldn't even be there that you're going to take out next month, then you may waste a
Mm-hmm.
ton of time doing that. So yeah, if you I think you said it best, if you can get the functionality in first and make it pretty enough, let's get the function first, and as long as that works, then we can go in with the pretty and the
Iterate.
details. I really think
Mm-hmm.
that's a great approach to anything.
Yeah.
Same things with we were
Yes.
talking about musicianship. Same thing as with a song. Like a song could never be done unless you're like, all right, we got to record. Like the album's, this is our recording session. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever we have, it's as good as it's gonna get. It's kind of the same thing. Otherwise, if you just say, yeah, I'm gonna make an album, well, when's it going to be done?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's never going to be done. You're going to be working on a song for 20 years.
Yes, and it reminds me of just a biblical analogy, where if those that read the scriptures and know how God is identified in many different ways, we identify God as the potter, and we, the beings, the creatures, we're consider ourselves the clay. And one thing that really comes to mind when talking about this particular topic is that we know we're not perfect. We're falling short of the glory of God. It says, "For we all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." But one thing in our Christian life that we can apply to the way that we work is sanctification. Sanctification is an iterative process of holiness. And Isaiah 64:8 talks about that sanctification process that God is constantly doing in our lives as believers, and also as fathers, husbands, sons and daughters, and professionals. And Isaiah 64:8 says this: "But now, O Lord, you are our Father, we are the clay, and you are our potter, we are all the work of your hand." And God knows and knew that we couldn't fulfill the law in all its entirety. So he gave his son. And by giving his son, Jesus Christ fulfilled the laws and the prophet. And that was one way in which we entered into the iterative process of God's will in our life. I don't want to get too emotional because this is really good. And we see that we also go through some downfalls in our life. We make errors, we make mistakes. But what's so beautiful is that the scripture says we have an advocate with the Father, and that's Jesus Christ. So, in the same way as developers, web designers, software engineers, we are the creator of that product, but we have to be patient. We have to be gracious. We have to be merciful with our product and ourselves, ultimately, as the professionals creating this, and take things in an iterative step.
I think that's the word. You just hit it right there, JB, which is iterative. Like there is iterations on things, just like software. There's like version 1, version 2, version 3,
Mm-hmm.
version 4. I mean, as humans, we're like that too, because humans aren't done. I think what's interesting too is I think about the term perfect is like that. I think would also, I don't know. I don't know where the term perfect came from.
Mm-hmm.
Is that even biblical? Was that ever in the Bible, the term perfect? Because I don't know.
Uh, well, in terms of like
I guess I'm
ourselves,
just wondering why is it that people want to just, and maybe this goes into
yeah,
creativity.
so perfect is used, right? So in Matthew 5:48, you therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect,
Okay, so I wonder, and
right?
maybe that's where like the iteration thing. I guess what I'm trying to say is like being a human isn't like a destination. It's not like I've arrived. I'm an
Mm-mm.
adult.
No,
I'm a dad.
exactly.
Like that's I think that's what. And as creatives, I think we probably struggle with this. It's like we have to be used to the constant iterations. It's like okay, feeling good in this area, but this area I'm falling short. Good in doing it. And look, business is just like that too. There's things in business that like I'm killing it here, not killing it here. And I honestly I think that's just life. I don't know if anyone is I don't want to say the term perfect, but no one's at the highest level on every front of their life.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like
Yeah.
you do your best, and hopefully you try to get as many things as good as you can. But even just practically, like completely practically, if I'm spending a lot of time with my family and things are really good, my business sometimes suffers because I'm not spending as much time there. Whereas if I'm spending a lot of time in
Mm-hmm.
my business, my numbers are going up, but I haven't been downstairs as much with my kids and we haven't been going out as much. So, but I think there's kind of a balancing act, and I think balance and iteration is the key there. But it all goes back to that point where, like, as humans, we're not done. We're not like,
Yeah.
I've arrived, which I don't know. Again, I don't know why. I don't know where the why we feel like we need to strive for that necessarily. But that's certainly my take on it. Is like there's this
Yeah.
pressure to feel
So
like you've arrived.
from a biblical perspective, the word perfect is not used in a humanistic sense, right? So God doesn't tell us to be perfect in a human sense. He calls us to be holy and righteous. So the Bible says, God Himself says that be holy because for I am holy. And depending on the translation and how they translated certain words, there's the word perfect appears. Um, but we know that God is all supreme and all perfect. But a question, right, that's kind of in this. Have you ever thought that what is not perfect to you is perfect to someone else when you were building your
Great
business and
question.
creating websites?
Great question. Yeah, and that's kind of where like the idea of like getting it to 90% is like perfect for a client. They may be like, "This is the best thing ever," but then you're like, "But I didn't
Right.
line up the style sheet code." Like, I know, like I didn't put all the comments in there yet, but they don't know. So it's a great point, man. Yeah, like what is terrible to you and what is not done is like perfection to somebody else. I think we see this a lot too in the entrepreneurial world with imposter syndrome and looking at somebody else's brand or their website or their content strategy, and you're like, gosh, they're just killing it. They're doing everything perfect. We all know that's not the case, and it's funny. I've talked to some people who, on the outside, it just looks like everything's cooking, and then when you really get down to it, they're like, well, parts of things are going well, but other parts are really not going well. So just like what we talked about. So yeah, that's a really good point. I think you're right. We're very harsh judges on ourselves sometimes, at least in the business world and
Mhm.
creativity wise. But yeah, you're right. Somebody may view it and be like, I would kill to have that set up. I'd be
Mhm.
love to be at that revenue number or whatever, where you get to a point where it's like, I feel like I'm failing, but I'm actually not. It's just,
Mhm.
things are going better than others. And again, the iteration thing, as you iterate, as your software upgrades, you get to almost a new level, and then things change as far
Mhm.
as the goals and everything else. And even like as your family grows, your revenue is probably going to need to grow because you have another mouth to feed, and there's whatever it is. So it's like it's all involved.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really good stuff there. And I was just thinking, was coming to mind, is that the word perfect or perfection to us outside of a biblical context has a also a human understanding, because our understanding of perfect can be very subjective if we take it out of its biblical
Mm.
context, if we take it out of what God is speaking to us when He says be acceptable, good, and perfect in His presence, be holy. So if we take that out of the biblical context and we think about how the world sees it, and this is a really important thing when it comes to like Christians who are developers, or if you're a web designer, if you're listening to this or watching this is where apologetics come into play. Sometimes you have to kind of be at a certain playing field when you're speaking to someone who don't know the gospel or doesn't understand what perfect or perfection means, because they have a very worldly understanding, a very secular understanding of it, that actually causes legalism over what your creative process is, causes dogmas or specific rituals to be built till you can get to this end goal. but you're never going to be there because you need that iterative process. And perfection actually can cause you not to have a unique position, a uniqueness in your position.
Yeah, great point. It's funny, the church that I was a part of when I got into web design, the tagline of the church was "No perfect people allowed," which brought in a lot of people who were like, all right, or non-traditional church types, and a lot of people who had been to a church but got burned by just the people aspect of it and all the politics and everything else that come along with
Yeah, the
a
human
group of
side of
people.
things.
So yeah, it's kind of funny, that that same thing. Yeah, it was really intentional, that church, which was to say like, yeah, we're not basically getting out of the suit and tie 90s style church, you know what I mean? Like or
Right.
even well, previous to that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, like overzealous.
yeah, just like
Um,
over polished. Yeah,
yeah,
that kind of thing.
yeah, and then but most of those churches, they have lots of problems that are behind curtains and stuff like that. And no, I get that. Like I can see that. And I mean, it's as simple as what Jesus says. He didn't come here for the righteous. He came here for the sinners. And um, when we are going through this process, this iterative process, we actually build uniqueness. And that uniqueness is what allows us to be adaptable, to be open to different strategies. Something that you've always taught us in the community and as a whole is be likable, right? Be know, like, and trust, right? So be trustable, and they know you by your expertise, and because you would be the first person in your head to pop up when somebody says, oh, I need a website for my business. Oh, I have just the right person for you. And but why is that? Because there's a remnant of something in you and I or someone else that they took away from their experience. It wasn't the design process, it wasn't how easy it flowed, it wasn't how good the product was. It was the overall experience that they had with interacting with you. And that's what a lot of people take away when they are recommending someone or when they desire to hire someone.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and there was a thought that I wanted to hit on real quick from that last thought, or that last segment, which was just the idea of like perfectionism, which is, I think it's really important just as people, as business owners and stuff too, but it's really important to remember that the hard times and the imperfect times are when you grow substantially. I don't know why, it's so easy to forget. Like, no one looks back and remembers a perfect day, everything just went great, and you're like, I really became the person who I am because it was an easy, perfect day. No, it's like, it's the hard stuff that you go through in life. It's the challenges. Case in point, this year has been a really hard year for me in business. It's been a challenging year. There's a change in the landscape of courses. There's a change in the landscape with web design, with tools and AI coming out and everything else. There's there's a lot more going on right now, and in a lot of ways I've had to try to adapt my business model to stay current and profitable, and it's been really challenging, it's been challenging, but I'll look back on this year, no doubt, and feel like I grew from this tremendously. So I think that's a really
Yeah.
important thing to remember. It's always a good reminder, like the hard times, the imperfect times, you do grow tremendously and become, a better iteration when you go through it.
Yes. 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 And that is the same way with the Christian life. We are going in through a time of tribulation or a time of trials or suffering, but actually that is what causes us to be mature in spirit, because as long as we are seeking the Father, as long as we are building a relationship with Jesus Christ, that is going to nourish us spiritually and takes us to a different level each and every time and every season.
You find that too.
And
Sorry, I mean to cut you off, but you find that
no, go ahead.
with folks who are new into a faith, it's like, I think some people might think like, oh, my problems are gone now, yay. If it's the
Yeah,
case
they
of,
go through like the honeymoon
yeah, the honeymoon
phase.
phase, and then you have the problem. They're like, wait, this Christianity thing doesn't work. It's broken. What's wrong? where it's like, no, that's life, baby.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna have valleys and peaks and
Mm-hmm.
everything in between. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
great point, man. Good
Yeah.
life lesson just in general too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think I've mentioned this before, and we'll start closing off the show here. I know you gotta go, um, but Paul mentions in Romans 5, he talks about just the suffering and what suffering produces, then what the after effects of it goes on. So it says here in chapter 5 of Romans 2 to 5, it says, through him we have also obtained access by faith. So, meaning we have obtained Jesus Christ by faith, into his this grace in which we stand, and we rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. Okay, now he starts to break this down. What does this look like, right? What does this walk look like? Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. But just right there, verses 3 and 4 are very key, because Paul is giving us a climax of all these different stages that we go through when life
Mm.
happens, and how important it is to rejoice in those as well, because wisdom is not built by age, it's not gained through being old, it's gained through
Yeah, well said.
experiences. And that's something that I've been learning in my season of life, these past couple seasons of life, since I sent you the emotional loom video.
And even
um,
like in business, some of the people I look up to as mentors right now with where I'm at, they've all had really tough seasons in business and in life, but they're at a point where yeah, they've got through it, or they learned something and figured something out that could be shared. And that's where the
mhm,
true value is. Nobody, yeah. And I mean, some people have different, easier paths than others, maybe, but everyone has learned something. And you're right, yeah. But at the same time, somebody who's old isn't necessarily wise. There might be a 30-year-old
that's
who's
right.
way wiser than a 70-year-old, depending on the journey, the
Hmm.
life journey to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes back to, like you were talking about, that baby Christian. There are some baby Christians, they're transformed instantly. Boom. And like they have the maturity of a Christian who's been in the faith for like 30 years. And then the one that's been in the faith for 30 years has the maturity of a 2-year-old Christian. And that's just how it is. I mean, the Bible does speak about that, the maturity aspect. But I think we can continue talking more, right, about this topic. It's such a wonderful topic, and I hope that you guys have taken so much out of this. I know it's really edifying for me, and I'm sure for Josh. We're both Joshuas, by
I know I call you
the
JB, but we're both
way.
Joshes.
Yeah, but guess what? I kept JB. You was like, hey JB, and I've kept it ever since. When I did videos for Divi Space, all the way, even at my job, I tell him to call me
Oh, nice.
JB, and I've been known as JB ever since you've uh, firmly
Branded it.
adopted it
I mean, it
onto.
just
Yeah,
sounds like it'd
yeah.
be a cool logo, just the JB. I've got all sorts of
Yeah.
design ideas, but I'm going to put a cap on them so we get it done.
Yeah, right. Awesome. But we're at the end of the show here, so I wanted to transition us to the breadcrumb section. So the breadcrumb section, we just think about it as the passing of the bread, like in the Last Supper. But we know that there's some breadcrumbs that were, dropped on the table, and they're probably just as resourceful. So this is the breadcrumb section. It's a little play on words and comedy. But this is where you can do your shameless plugs. You can encourage people with a resource that you have, or a word of encouragement that you may have. You could talk about your business, where they can find you, social medias, etc. So take
Thanks,
it
man.
away.
Yeah, everything is at my site, which is joshhall.co. So as of right now, it's a personal brand. The community you're a part of, I was going to call you Josh, JB, is called Web Designer Pro, and it has all my courses, coaching with me directly, and just an incredible community of designers from all over the world to help folks with mainly the web design business side of things. So yeah, that's the community aspect. But if you go to joshhall.co, there's a link to my podcast, my YouTube channel, all that good stuff. This was fun, man. There's been a lot of really cool things we've hit on here, which I don't really typically go into. I think one of the most important things that I just like to reiterate and bring back up is just really being intentional about, well, there's quite a few things, but I would say the intentionality with like managing creativity with business. I have a feeling a lot of people watching and listening to this are of the creative mold, and that's going to be the main struggle. You really do have to manage the creativity and the business side of things. And again, if you want to do something creative with no limits, then do it, but don't expect that to pay your bills because it's not going to. So it's always a great reminder to work on creativity and business and caps and deadlines and all that good stuff that gets projects done.
Right, right. It's very important to have some checks and balances in place.
There we go. Well said.
Awesome. So yeah, so I will drop all that down in the show notes and the video description for those watching on YouTube. This has been really, really exciting. Season 3 has been off the chart and has been very edifying, not only for my person, but for the people that are listening and watching. For me, I actually don't have a breadcrumb. I think I try to leave this for the guests mostly because everybody knows who I am and what my likings are, those that are in the community. But I do want to drop in the community in this segment. If you are a believer and want to be a part of our community, the link is down in the video description or in the show notes. We're a group of believers who are developers or software engineers, either trying to transition into the industry or have been there and have been laid off. We pray for each other. We have sometimes weekly sessions teaching each other something that we don't know in the tech space, in the developer space. We do co-working there as well. So if you need someone, Christian is always co-working with me. So we're co-working in the channel, but it's a lot of fun, and it's a really safe place, and you get to learn how to be bold and courageous in your faith while also being an engineer or a developer, even a web design business
Hey,
owner.
divinewebdesign.com is on sale for $1,200. So there we go.
Sounds like somebody's gonna buy a
I'm
new
not
domain.
gonna buy that one. If it was 12, it was $12. I might
buy. Awesome, brother. Well, thank you so much for being on this show. It's been a blessing to have you on here, and thank you so much for watching, guys. Make sure to follow us on the social medias. Those links will be down. We're on Threads. We're not on Threads yet. I might make a Threads. We're on Twitter, or Twix as I like to call it, YouTube, and on Discord. So make sure to subscribe for more content so you'll be notified when new episodes go live. I'll see you guys around. This has been another episode of Code Fellowship, where purpose meets function. Take care.
Thanks,
and God
JB.
bless.